Welcome everybody who is joining us online. We appreciate you being here this afternoon. We are excited to have this first round of strategy presentation from Development Strategies today. I'd like to start out and say thank you to the steering committee who's done a lot of work throughout the process to get to this point. And more importantly, thanks to all of you in the public who have participated by filling out surveys and participating in focus groups. We got a really good participation and really good feedback. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Development Strategies and our team. We have Matt Wetley, Justin Carney, and Miriam Keller with us tonight. And so take it away.
Great. Thank you, Bob. And looking at Justin, Miriam, can you see my screen? Can everyone see?
Good.
Screen? Fantastic. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. And welcome to the Town Hall Strategy presentation for the City of Clemson. We're going to take about an hour here today. We'll be recording this video and so people can watch it again or share it, watch it at their leisure. And we will have a survey that follows this. So we really will continue to need your participation in this. And we want to thank you all for your attendance today. So I want to share a little bit first about where we are in the process. Then we want to really frame the strategy, the why. You're going to see in this presentation a number of strategies that we feel respond to the feedback we got in a previous survey through stakeholder input, working with a steering committee. And this is our opportunity to present those strategies to you so that you can then respond and tell us if we're hitting the mark. So we will be presenting those strategies on number 3 here, but number 2 is really explaining why we've hit those strategies. So here's the process to date, and we're basically at the tail end of step 2 here. So we step 1 was really the understand phase, where we did our analysis and we created a whole series of videos that I think got 3,000 survey responses. So just an incredible turnout from this community. And we took that feedback and we've gone about creating strategies over the past couple of months. And we're going to put those in front of you all today. We're going to post this online and we need you to tell us what you think, because that's where we are in the process. And from there, we're going to take that feedback and further refine these before we make our final recommendations and report to council in the form of a white paper. So we appreciate your continued involvement in this, and it's absolutely crucial that we hear from you all. Now, a little refresher, this is a strategic plan, and why do a strategic plan? Well, every city has a finite amount of time, money, and energy to invest in itself. And great communities are defined by the wisdom of the choices that they make in how they expend these. And a strategic plan is really about asking a community, where do you want to go? And what are the best ways to invest time, money, and energy to get there? And this isn't unique just to cities. All organizations need to do a strategic plan from time to time. Institutions, corporations, small businesses, foundations, nonprofits, everyone from time to time needs to say, hey, the world outside us is changing, and we need to figure out how we want to adapt and fit within that new reality. And that has involved necessarily a dialogue where we're sharing our thoughts as planners, helping you see things through our eyes, and you all, through survey, through stakeholder interviews, have shared with us your experiences through your eyes about your community, about Clemson. And where we'll need to work is work toward is prioritization of strategies and how to best adapt to change. Now, a lot of work's been underway from the city. There's been a number of plans, and just a few of which include a comprehensive plan update and a downtown corridor study and a bikeway plan and the Green Crescent Trail plan. There's been a number of efforts that have happened or are underway or are slated to happen to invest in your community. And all of these are really consistent with the strategies that you're going to hear us put forward. And the degree to which these can be advanced will also advance a lot of the strategies and the goals and objectives that are expressed in this plan. And those include things aimed at creating a more inclusive community, creating a better place, better quality of life, and creating a more resilient community. What brought us here, what created this plan in the beginning was growth, and this community has experienced what is for it an unprecedented amount of it. And where we need to end is making specific land use recommendations. What we want to do is, in this process, over these 6 months, is understand that growth, understand the forces that shape it, and ultimately make land use recommendations that are more, that make this community more in line with what people want, and make it more inclusive, more resilient, and possessing of a higher quality of place. We've asked a number of questions along the way. Do we have to grow? Why are we growing? How much are we growing? And we made videos around inclusivity, around place and quality of life and resiliency. We heard from you what you wanted and what your priorities were at this. So now it's time to ask these questions. Where do we want to grow? And how do we want to do it? These are the critical questions now.
Yeah, so like Matt said, we've had the benefit of many conversations with the steering committee, with the public, and the survey, where we heard from, it was almost 1,000 unique participants in that survey process. So really got a very broad participation in that. There's too much to share in the context of this presentation. We'll be posting more details on the website about the survey results, but we want to share some of the big priorities that stood out to us that are shaping kind of the strategies that have risen to the top and what we'll be presenting today. So on the next slide, you'll see, as it relates to inclusivity, when we asked among all of the different aspects of inclusivity that are important, that could be important to Clemson, what rises to the top of the list? And you can see these top 3 priorities there. So preventing displacement in communities of color. Second, improving housing quality and stability in lower income neighborhoods to contribute to a higher quality of life in all of Clemson's neighborhoods. And third, expanding affordable options so people who live and work in Clemson, Clemson's essential workforce, have access to quality housing choices in the community. When it comes to place and quality of life, traffic and limiting the impacts on traffic of new development is a clear priority right at the top of the list, and we heard a lot about that as well, talking to all of you in the roundtable discussions and with the steering committee. Second, really preserving and enhancing downtown. And third, just how important pedestrian and bike accessibility and infrastructure will be as part of quality of life, but also as a strategy for mitigating the growth in traffic as the community grows. And then thinking about resiliency, supporting local, distinct, authentic businesses downtown and in storefronts, really clear priority. Second, supporting more innovation and startups and research in the community to diversify the economy also stood out as a priority. And third, less so, but definitely still in the mix, and the idea of creating more of a brand or identity for the city of Clemson, independent from the university, and establishing the community as a destination to attract more visitors throughout the year, including as a means to generate more retail spending potential and fill some of those storefronts. And so that's just a quick summary. We'll be posting more detailed survey results. And tonight, I want to encourage everybody who has a comment to share that in the chat box. We won't be having a live Q&A part of this, but we'll be using all of the chat conversation, which Justin will be kind of keeping an eye on and moderating. We'll be using all of that to refine all of the strategy work as we move forward, in addition to the survey responses from this next survey we'll be posting.
So now I want to frame the strategy. And what I mean by framing, as I said, is we're going to present to you what the strategies are, and we want to hear back from you on what you think about those. But first, we want to take a minute to explain why we created these strategies, because I think for some, it requires a shift in thinking about what really makes communities thrive and how to approach it. And we're here to tell you that some of the conventional strategies that cities have used when confronted with growth likely won't work, but there are strategies that will, and we want to share with you what they are and why. So what we're talking about at its essence is growth and change, and these are some of the hardest things to address for any community because it's existential. What are we growing into, and what do we want to become? The reality is communities must continually evaluate how to adapt in order to flourish because change is all around us. Now, one of the things we talked about in our video is some of our videos and analysis and shared with you is the future growth that's coming. And we're here to tell you that it's going to be significant. This was a study done by Upstate Forever a few years back that looked not only at Clemson, but also Greenville, Spartanburg, the whole upstate region. And this is the amount of land developed in 2015. And under current growth patterns, this is what it's going to look like by 2040. Virtually under current land use patterns, which are largely single family, there will be no land left between these communities, no farmland. It's going to get developed out because there's an incredible rate of growth in this region. And that's going to produce a lot more traffic. We heard from you all that traffic's a big concern, and we want to tell you and be upfront with you and be very honest with you as a community that traffic pressures are going to continue to increase. And that growth is going to continue to increase. And it is largely out of your control as a community. The factors driving growth have a lot to do with being in one of the most rapidly growing economic regions in the country, located between Charlotte and Atlanta. It has to do with having a flagship university and the rise of flagship universities in general. And it has to do with being adjacent to Greenville and the growth that it's experiencing. These are the things that aren't in your control. But in addition to that, we've done some projections of future growth, both student and non-student, economic growth, both university-based and non-university-based, and it's substantial. Our projections are for the next 10 years. Based on the factors that we've looked at, that growth could accelerate decades from now. And so your reality, Clemson, is that growth is coming. And the real question is, how do you want to address it? How do you want to handle it? Clemson right now is at a crucial decision point for this community. And it's less about, how do we keep growth from happening, because it is going to happen, but how do we look at it with clear eyes and make the right decisions that propel our community forward? And we're happy to tell you that there are communities that have made very good decisions at this critical decision point. And there are a number of strategies that you can employ to accomplish so many of the goals and objectives and things that this community expressed as being important. Now, our advice, our clinical experience is such that the best way to approach growth, to approach the challenges of your community, you'll be relatively more successful when you think about your city as being made of these different systems that are fundamentally here to serve people. If you're thinking about your community as the people, the workers, the citizens, and the consumers that compose it, as opposed to thinking of your city as a collection of streets and roads. It's going to inform a set of strategies that are going to be a lot more successful. And I often like to do an exercise with communities where I ask you all, if we were here in person, we'd ask you, where is your economy? Where's your innovation? Where's your education? Your culture? What is it that you value the most? And none of these things can be tied specifically to a particular area or to a piece of infrastructure or a particular building, although they do, some of these things do occur in buildings, okay? Communities are more than that. You're more than that, Clemson. It's a collection of people. And we've got to make sure that the systems are serving you. So I'm going to give you some examples. I want to give you an example of that. First, I want to talk about traffic, which is a big hot button issue. We saw from the surveys, this is a big concern, the increasing traffic in this community. And it's a real concern. It's a very real and tangible concern. What we want to do is share with you 3 approaches that other communities have taken that are largely failed strategies. Communities, I want to share with you stories about communities that when they were at that critical decision point, when they were confronted with unprecedented growth the way you all are now, many of them resort to these 3 strategies or a combination of them. And unfortunately, they're not successful strategies. And I want to explain them to you. The first one is shut it down. Let's say this community could limit growth to just outside of the city and just say, hey, shut it down. We don't want any more growth. The problem, of course, are all those other things we talked about. The university is going to continue to grow. The region's going to continue to grow. People are going to locate then on the periphery of your community. And Clemson University isn't going to move. Your major employers aren't going to move. That just means more and more people are certain to have to drive in by car to get here. So this would be the worst strategy possible if traffic's your concern, to shut down growth and cause it to go to the perimeter, the periphery of your community. And we're already seeing a bit of that pattern. This shows commuting patterns through your community. Very, very few people both live and work in Clemson. Most people already live outside of Clemson and drive in. This is what's contributing to rush hour traffic. All right. To have relatively more people living and working in the city would make for shorter commutes and would lessen traffic. The second failed strategy is what we call the double down strategy. And you don't have to look too far. You can go down the road for what we would call the poster child, probably the best national case study for road widening and lane widening projects and why they don't work. And I'm talking about Atlanta. So Atlanta has an incredibly successful economy and it's growing rapidly. And for the better part of 2 decades, the way they addressed traffic was to simply add another lane and add another lane. And what that would do is it would alleviate traffic for a little bit. It would get it moving for a while, but it would create something that we call induced traffic. Once it got moving again, development would continue to happen further and further out, and it would clog traffic again. It would add another lane. At some point, they reached a limit, and it didn't work. So cities all over the world, and not just in the United States, are looking at that case study and saying, this is not a successful approach. And that's why it won't be successful to simply widen roads and widen the arterial roads within your community. There's a third approach, the bypass approach, which is to introduce a new route that goes around the city so that through traffic doesn't come through here. And there's a logic to this, and we understand that. The problem is that estimates of that bypass are around $500 million. The state DOT has not said that this is something that they're going to do or prioritize, and this is something that's largely out of the control of the city of Clemson. But there's another reason that this is not the best approach. If we step back and we thought about this critically for a minute, what else could you do if there was $500 million to spend? What else could you do with that? Well, Clemson could build 50 miles of walkable, livable, transit-supporting complete streets so that this community could get around by ways other than car. And in fact, Clemson only has 10 miles of major arterial, so you wouldn't even need that much investment to make this a walkable, livable environment in all of your corridors. Well, let's think about it further, okay? Thinking about this idea about thinking about investing in people, cities being made of people first and not brick and mortar. A lot of people expressed concern about affordable housing. Well, for $500 million, you could build 2,500 new homes and give them away. You could give 10,000 residents, roughly the number of permanent non-student residents in this community, a $50,000 check. You could give 500 small businesses $1 million in seed money. And that was another thing the survey said. People want more and varied small businesses. You could fund a quality transit system for 50 years, buy 1,000 city buses. Heck, you could buy helicopters and help people commute that way. Now, the reality is there is no pot of gold. There is no $500 million. And even if there was, there would be better ways to invest in your city. If you all truly want to become an inclusive, resilient community with a higher quality place, we are here to tell you there are definitely better ways to invest in your community. And so that's the question. What does Clemson want its legacy to be? Do you want to follow the same standard approaches which have been shown to fail and for which there are better ways to allocate resources? This is your decision point. Now let's take another example. Student housing and density, another hot button issue and a real challenge for this community and for other communities with flagship universities, especially small towns. Student housing, especially upscale student housing off campus, has happened at an unprecedented rate that has provided challenges for virtually every community where it's occurred. And we talked in one of our educational videos about how that shapes land economics, that student housing, upscale student housing is such that a real estate developer can offer $3 million per acre for a piece of land. And prior to that, nobody could offer more than $500,000 in your major commercial areas. So they're able to buy up the choicest pieces of real estate. And one of the recommendations we're making is to find opportunities to develop that development product so that alleviates development pressure in other parts of your corridor where things like workforce housing can only economically viably occur at lower land prices. Another way to look at this, think of it this way. This is one of the best ways I can explain this. Have you ever been to an aquarium and wondered, how do they keep the sharks from eating all the other fish in the tank? You talk to operators of aquariums and they'll tell you that's the #1 question that they get. And there's a variety of strategies that they employ. You know, they get the right mix of fish. They can train the sharks to some degree. But the #1 strategy is to make sure that they're well fed, to understand exactly how much food and energy that shark needs to consume each day, and make sure they're well fed. And that's why they don't consume the rest of the fish. We could think of market analysis and student housing in the same way. If we understand how much demand there is for upscale student housing and provide it somewhere, then that's going to mean that the rest of the land isn't going to get gobbled up by student housing. And we can start to plan for other types of uses, whether that's workforce housing, affordable housing, commercial space for small businesses. That's the simplest way we can explain it. And this would start to open up our other areas, and so that we could plan for other uses that you all have told us are important to you. So a question that we've gotten in this plan several times is, what are you going to do about traffic? What are you going to do, and why the focus on student housing? Well, it's not on student housing for student housing's sake. The reality is placing high-end units in one place will keep rents down in others. Student units in one place will reduce land speculation in others, giving those opportunities for workforce development opportunities. Also, you can take lucrative development and harness the revenue that creates and divert some of it into funds that help you achieve other things, other community goals. An affordable housing fund, for example, or a land trust that ensures that vulnerable populations don't get displaced. And by the way, foot traffic and density for non-students could actually support more and diverse businesses in your community. So as you'll see, one of the strategies is to find areas for growth in the city, ideally that are close to employment, close to the university, and to link them with great multimodal infrastructure, bike and pedestrian facilities, walkable sidewalks, transit, and some of this you can see from the downtown corridor study is already included in a plan that was recently completed in that key stretch. And when we're talking about sites close to the university, one of the few options available, because so much of the community is developed with neighborhoods that need to be protected, are some of your commercial areas, areas with either vacant buildings or underutilized buildings, low rent buildings or deteriorated ones, areas with excessive amounts of surface parking. These are going to be your best opportunities to allow for development that's transit supporting. And our study shows that as many as 500 housing units could be supported on just 8 acres, or as many as 20 acres, depending on that density. And there is a lot of land in your corridors if we look at these denser housing formats. So what these strategies can do if we find places for student housing, if we find places for workforce housing, is it can alleviate some of the escalating housing costs. We can't depress them, we can't have them not go up at all, but we can bend the affordability curve. So if we think about this line here as being the income of a nurse, of a school teacher, of an assistant professor, we can make it so that rents escalate on a more sustainable path. And the same is true for traffic. We can't sit here and promise you that there's any one strategy that's going to make traffic go down. What we can tell you is a host of strategies, when done in unison, can ensure a slower trajectory and a more manageable trajectory of traffic growth while you build other infrastructure elements that provide better and more varied options to get around in this community. And the reason for that is that multifamily housing requires fewer trips per day. People that live in multifamily housing travel less, and especially if you can link it to transit, which does require a certain density in order to work. Do you remember the slide that we showed a few minutes ago? Sorry, having a little bit of a slide lag here. Slide we showed a few minutes ago showing that projected scenario with all of this development. There is another way. If Clemson, Greenville, Spartanburg, they got together, took this corridor-based approach, according to that study for upstate, just 10% of the land would be consumed that otherwise will be consumed under the current trends. And so that's a lot less land and a lot less traffic that would be clogging these arteries. And so here's that other projected scenario. You might recall in that other one, all this land was built out. This is another approach that would preserve a lot of undeveloped land and reduce traffic. And by the way, it's a lot cheaper to extend utilities and roads to smaller areas for development. It's much more expensive to spend it on sprawling areas with 2 and 3 and 4 units per acre. So that could free up a lot of money to spend on other things that this community has expressed that it wants. Now, development shouldn't occur in this community for development's sake. It needs to be paired with a community contract. That density has to come with other benefits for this community, which means preserving and protecting key neighborhoods, as well as historic areas in downtown and the lakefront. It also means making sure that money is going into funds for affordable housing, for workforce housing, and that policies ensure that housing developed for that middle market is delivered to that middle market, not just students. And as we said, there is no pot of gold. There is greater revenue that the city can derive from development. This is also going to take university partnerships. The university is going to have to play a key role in student housing development. It's going to have to play a key role in transit and entrepreneurship. So this is where we are. Imagine coming into a a doctor's appointment and you have some kind of ailment, and the best answer you could possibly get is there's some kind of pill you can take that won't require any effort. It's low cost. It won't require you to change your lifestyle in any way, shape, or form. And we're not telling you that as it pertains to this. There is no silver bullet fix. There is no pill. But you can put these strategies in place that can mitigate the costs of growth and change, of traffic, and the cost of housing. And in doing so, you can become a more inclusive, resilient community with a higher quality of life. So we're here again to tell you, Clemson, you're more than your traffic networks, okay? There are so many elements of your community that can get richer and more vibrant and better and more diverse. And we can mitigate the worst impacts along the way as well. And so the strategies we're going to put forth are really aimed at that. It's looking at this growth realistically, thinking about new land use patterns, not applying the old fixes that have been tried in the past that have been proven to fail, and to try to harness that development in ways that make you more inclusive, resilient, create a higher quality of life. These images that you see here are from other college towns. Walkable, mixed use, vibrant, transit supporting, bikeable. These things are within your grasp as a city. These strategies that you're going to see are aimed at creating a better, more inclusive community, and this is within your grasp. We're going to share with you the 6 strategies. We're going to share with you the what. We shared with you the why. We're going to share with you the what. And key takeaway is that there's a lot of things under these 6 strategies for your city staff to do. There's a lot of things for council to do. There's also roles for each and every citizen. There's roles for the university, roles for entrepreneurs and businesses. It's going to take the whole community. It's not the easy answer. It's not the pill approach, but it's an honest approach, and it's the one that will give you a better, more sustainable, more resilient community moving forward. Next, I'm going to turn it, Miriam and I are going to run through the 6 strategies with you all. And each of those strategies is really aimed at addressing these 4 goals of encouraging appropriate housing that's affordable to a wide spectrum of the Clemson community, that honors Clemson's cultural, historic, and natural assets and resources, that positions Clemson to welcome and adapt to economic change and opportunities, and creates livable places and a high quality of life. Over to you, Miriam.
Great. So with that, like Matt said, kind of what he just presented provides sort of the why for the 6 strategies and their kind of components that we're about to share with you that I hope start to address some of the more specific comments appearing in the chat. So you can see, there are 6. The first, to address housing affordability. And there are a few pieces to this. The first, to allow for a broader mix of housing types. The second, to prevent encroachment of student housing into historic neighborhoods and traditional neighborhoods. The third, to, in a real focused way, create and preserve affordable housing options. And then the fourth, to target some portion of new housing options to non-students. And I'll walk through each of these still at a fairly high level. Our next step, as Matt said, is to really get into the details of all of this and identify specific implementation steps. So for those of you who have been able to watch the videos, we talked about this really powerful role that density plays in affordability, where on high value lands, very low density housing is just not going to be attainable to most people who live and work in Clemson today. And I know that this is a challenge a lot of people are very well aware of. And so, thinking about new ways of using not just undeveloped and underutilized land, but land in and at the edges of neighborhoods to encourage small lot single family housing development. And we know there's been a lot of conversation underway around an R6 zoning designation, and also allow for missing middle housing types in more areas than they're allowed today. So the duplexes, townhomes, small scale condos and 4-unit walk-ups that can bring things a little bit better into more of a workforce affordable range. The second strategy is really about, none of these are silver bullets, right? But kind of the things that need to be thought about to prevent the encroachment of student housing into traditional single-family neighborhoods. A big part of that, this kind of gets to Matt's shark analogy, right, is to identify the specific areas and provide kind of a zoning framework for student housing along commercial corridors. And in a way that really starts to satisfy demand in the context of other development happening in the region. The second is to think about on-campus housing opportunities. And some universities have put policies in place, for example, to require freshmen and sophomores to live on campus and provide the housing needed to do that. And then there are tools through zoning as well to set strong expectations that there will not be rezonings for commercial large multifamily uses in single family neighborhoods, even if land is acquired to do that. And to continue to enforce some of the policies already in place around occupancy maximums, and to continue the rental housing program that kind of monitor the quality and location of student housing in the community. So this third piece is to really take, with strong intention, a look at affordability in the community. And we know that a community housing foundation is getting just off the ground to do some of this work. And part of that's legacy and air education. So people's property rights are protected, especially in historically African-American neighborhoods. And ultimately to acquire and support the development of affordable housing. And so, this is a really important, we think, entity to be creating, and creating a dedicated local funding source for that work is really a key piece of this puzzle. A lot of communities will have these organizations in place, but without sufficient funding to support that work in the way that matches the ambitions of the community, it won't be as effective. And two, as we begin to think about catalyst areas, which we'll present in the sixth strategy, to think about the role of workforce and affordable housing in those two. The last piece here is target new housing options to non-students. And this is where we see in other communities a planned development process being used to establish guidelines that help to do some of this targeting. So requiring developers to require residents to income qualify on their own, for example, to rent by unit rather than by bedroom, to limit unit sizes, to put other measures in place that really make it a more suitable product for non-students than for students. And then again, to continue to enforce those existing policies. And third, the Community Housing Foundation or another community development entity playing an active role in developing affordable housing can be a part of this too, delivering workforce and affordable housing to the intended market. So the second strategy is about enhancing the public realm. And the pieces of that are about lake access. And we've heard how important and unique that is in Clemson, improving comfort and character along commercial corridors throughout the city, but especially as we're trying to create transit and walkable new development, and to think about opportunities to incorporate new green space in and alongside development and downtown. We'll walk through each of these briefly too. So enhancing lake access. Part of that is improving connections where they exist, expanding connections. And in some cases, commercial redevelopment may actually create new opportunities to create connections, preserve views, and potentially create more access to the lake as it happens in certain locations. improving comfort and character along commercial corridors in downtown. So if we're trying to support development in a format where walking, biking, and taking transit are attractive options to help keep students off the road and other people off the road and make driving more of an option, sort of second to other options, need to really think about the character of the public realm and make sure that it's inviting, safe, and comfortable. On the next slide, the city has lots of plans in place already. Maybe there's a little bit of a lag here I'm seeing, but the downtown corridor master plan lays out a vision for exactly what this could be in Clemson's downtown. The Green Crescent Trail, of course, would be a really critical piece of this as well. And then finally, incorporating quality public space into new development. So in areas where there's an opportunity for acquisition and assembly of parcels into a larger area where there's a unified development vision, that type of thinking and that type of process creates the opportunity to integrate more amenities like green space, public space, and even some programmed open space that could serve not just residents of the new development, but the entire community.
Okay, so let's talk about strategy 3, which is cultivate entrepreneurship and innovation. This was something that came up a lot in our conversations, in particular that people would like to see more and varied storefront options, restaurants, dining, and so on. Innovation is also an important part of this. As part of a university town, there's opportunities to, we're advising exploring more opportunities for co-working and other types of spaces that provide opportunities for startup businesses. There is a university-supported incubator. They have expressed some interest in having a storefront presence in the community, and this would be great for diversifying your economy. We'll also put forth strategies to create more of an ecosystem that gets at creating more small and local businesses. And that's really what it takes. It takes an ecosystem. Like so many other things, there isn't a silver bullet solution, but there's certainly paths forward to have more of that active, vibrant college town kind of environment with the diversity of businesses that I think people are craving. And creating a business improvement district is one of the most logical things. This is really something that can be led by your business community, but supported by the city and supported by the university. And there's a variety of different models. We looked at several in different university communities, different college towns that involve really businesses getting together, marketing together, doing things like downtown maintenance and shared parking and all of these things. And in several instances, the university and the city play a supporting role in those. Moving on to strategy 4, community history and character. There's a number of elements to this, including creating neighborhood plans, beginning with Clemson's historically African-American neighborhoods, continuing to evaluate zoning and design guidelines for Clemson's core, and leveraging development to support the creation of public amenities. So this involves facilitating community-driven planning processes to establish neighborhood investment priorities such as cultural and historical expression and preservation priorities. This is about working with some neighborhoods that in many cases are historically Black or African-American that are going to require some attention and some investments. And it also involves continuing to evaluate zoning and design guidelines for the core of downtown. The city has been refining those guidelines, reducing height limits, so buildings can't be as tall. They're changing facade requirements to require more bricks so that buildings complement kind of that downtown, historic downtown, college town feel that people have expressed. So supporting more of that and looking for opportunities to support the arts, which we see in so many vibrant university communities. And whether that's in the downtown, whether it's along the Green Crescent Trail, is going to be contributive to history and character. Strategy 5, moving people, not cars. So this really gets at transportation. And we're not talking about taking, eliminating cars, but we are talking about thinking about how we move people around first and foremost. And so that involves improving bike and pedestrian infrastructure. It involves enhancing transit options and addressing parking in some places. When we're thinking about bike and pedestrian infrastructure, this is a really important concept to understand. Historically, cities, when you see those bike lanes that are 3 feet wide on the side of a busy arterial, that's really designed as, that's recreation infrastructure. That's really designed to a very small swath of our population. I kind of think of them as this kind of the spandex folks that are kind of your hardcore bikers. If we really want people moving around by bike as a real part of the community's infrastructure to take cars off the road, it needs to be protected bike facilities. That's how you get a much larger share of people biking and off the roads. And when we look at the system right now of bike facilities, really only this green part here really meets that criterion today. But there are plans to invest in some key areas, including College Avenue. So when those get funded, that's going to make for some significant improvements to your transportation network, your non-auto transportation network. And here's kind of, what some of those things can look like. This is what we mean when we say protected bike lanes. These are environments that a lot more people feel safe on. These types of approaches are fine on less busy roads. You're going to need more of this in your community. And we also looked at some other university communities that score much higher in terms of transit performance. We looked at Charlottesville, we looked at Blacksburg, we looked at Morgantown. We've done some case studies. In all of these instances, there's a greater budget for transit, and the university is a strong participant in that, up to 50% of that from Virginia Tech and Blacksburg. So this is one of those cases where a university partnership really is important. You're going to need a really effective transit system, and there isn't a gentle way of saying this. Clemson system needs to be better in order to take cars off the road. And lastly, thinking especially in an area like downtown, maybe for a parking garage in the future that enables people, yes, people might be driving to downtown, but if we can get them to park once and then walk around downtown, that's going to alleviate some traffic. So looking for those opportunities, looking for parking opportunities where they exist is going to be really important. And then lastly, we've got about 12 minutes here, and we want to share this with you. This is about establishing development opportunities. And you're going to see a survey is going to go out. We really need your input on this. These are the strategies that we're putting forth. Now, these will require exercising greater regulatory control for the type and character and location of density. It's not everywhere. It's going to be in key places. Reviewing and refining guidelines for building design and development. Exploring public-private partnerships and identifying those appropriate redevelopment sites in areas that mitigate traffic impacts. Okay, so we've identified 9 potential areas for development and growth over the next 10 years. And these will have a different emphasis in our strategies, depending on whether they're on campus or campus adjacent. Those are going to, definitely have a student focus. There's other areas kind of in between that could have more of a mix of student and non-student housing, as well as other uses. And then there's some development areas that are a little more remote, but could be better linked with transits, where the emphasis can be on, non-students, can be on market rate housing, but also that missing middle workforce housing, as well as affordable housing. And these are those areas. And again, there's going to be a recording of this, so you can go back and look at each of these areas. We want to walk you through each of the 9 with our remaining time and give you the highlights so that you can come back and look at these concepts and tell us what you think in the survey. Number 1, Miriam. Oh, you're on mute, Miriam.
Thank you. Looks like I need to double click to unmute. Now, so this area is, the far north of the city, parts of it outside of the city that would require annexation, some of it environmentally sensitive, and all north of, the major traffic bottleneck at the intersection of Tiger and College. And what we see could happen here is housing primarily oriented to non-students, but a mix of market rate housing alongside workforce and affordable housing in kind of a new urbanist format. And all of this kind of mixed with neighborhood serving commercial and retail uses in a walkable format. So people, living there could sort of have most trips within this kind of new growing part of the community. And a potential to integrate office too, part of that broader effort to diversify the community's economy. And to make this work, you would really, this would need to happen alongside significant investments in transit, and also to think about how to design with nature and sort of mitigate the environmental impacts there in a way that also creates potentially water and access to water.
Catalyst area 2, near north. So this is an area that today, it's kind of a mix of older student housing. It has some undeveloped areas. There is some acquisition and assembly already underway. And so I think the efforts here would be more about bolstering that with transit and bike and pedestrian facilities to minimize the amount of traffic that largely student housing would contribute, particularly down College to get to the university. So there's kind of that bottleneck of traffic at Tiger and College, so that would need to get addressed with some more detailed strategies that we'd focus on in the next phase. Catalyst area 3, establish uptown. So I want to draw a distinction between uptown and downtown. Downtown, we all know what that area is, and the effort there is largely going to be about complementing what's there. As I said, there's design standards in place. Some of the ground has been downzoned. This is uptown. This is the area closer to Tiger Boulevard, and this is really about rethinking this area with a mix of student housing, some of which is already planned and underway, with non-student housing, and with a mix of businesses and key uses like a food hall and ground floor retail. And this is where a business incubator could go. And so the effort here is about providing a diversity of experiences and making sure that areas adjacent to the lake are protected and perhaps enhanced. There's redevelopment that could occur along Tiger where you've got some commercial sites backing up to the lake. Perhaps those could be developed in the future so that public amenity is part of the system, and views of the water are part of the system, and linking all that with great bike and pedestrian infrastructure as a gateway into the downtown. Possibly other civic uses could include an expanded art center at some point in the future. Miriam?
Yeah, so catalyst areas 4 and 5, you can see them on the little key map, are within the city of Clemson, but right at the edge of Clemson University, where today there's a mix of older student housing, some institutional uses, and a couple of surface parking lots. And in both of these cases, kind of some dynamic topography that creates some challenges, but also presents some opportunities. What we envision here would be that these would be really very appropriate places for high density student housing, bringing as many students as possible, as close to campus as possible, for really limiting the number of cars and the amount of driving students would need to do. Significant density would be required in these places to support the acquisition costs. Potentially integrating some limited student serving retail, but not a major new mixed use focus. And especially at the edges, incorporating green space and thinking about height transitions to to limit the impact on surrounding neighborhoods.
And then when we think about Catalyst Area 6, this is growing on campus. So this is where the university can play a significant role moving forward. This is about student housing on campus. There has been some, university development over 2,000 beds, in fact. And so this is about continuing that, looking at examples of other university communities that have explored even public-private partnerships to build a significant amount of student housing on campus. It's not going to be a panacea. We know that juniors and seniors generally are not going to live on campus, but if the university could take on more of a share of student housing, again, that's going to greatly improve traffic. It's going to free up land for development for other uses for this community. And so this is a role that the university can play, a significant role. This, along with transit, along with helping with entrepreneurship, to really help Clemson, the city, as a whole community, become everything that it can be. Miriam?
Yeah, so this area, just a bit north and east of Clemson University along Old Greenville Highway, where there's some older student housing today. We see potential to redevelop this to provide housing, a mix to for students and to non-students, and in a way that would incorporate some missing middle and workforce housing options. Especially in the northern part of this area, closer to the Clemson's African American Museum. This is an area that's actually large enough to provide some internal green space and do that in a way that would enhance the connections to and visibility of and access to the Clemson African American Museum, and to think about this development in a way that contributes to this part of the Clemson community, while also providing new housing options for students and non-students together.
Looking at Catalyst Area 8, which we're tentatively calling Clemson Crossing. And this is just a little bit further out. It's in that area where the old Bilo grocery store is. And this is an area where, there's some vacant and underutilized commercial uses, a preponderance of surface parking lots. We think this is a great opportunity for a mixed use, transit supported community, village, walkable, that consists of a mix of largely workforce and affordable and market rate housing. So this is an area that's not about students. And this is about targeting, a mix of multifamily typologies to really target that missing middle of housing types. There could be some ground floor retail, possibly a junior anchor, maybe some inclusion of office space. I mean, there's a fair amount of land available for development. And if that's linked with a great transit system, with good bike and pedestrian infrastructure, as well as solutions like a park and ride, this could be a really great place that can address some of these issues of a lack of affordability for this group that's been underserved in terms of housing.
And the final area we want to mention is the Packlet-Milliken site, where of course planning is already underway in this large undeveloped area, oriented mostly to non-students. And like in other places where we're talking about housing oriented to non-students, that would necessarily need to be accompanied by policies to ensure that that's delivered to the non-student housing market. This will be a mix of upscale housing, workforce housing, market rate housing, with some neighborhood serving retail within it as well. And like in other places, the transit and multimodal connections will be a key part of making it successful and reducing and mitigating the traffic impacts on the broader community.
So here's a grid that really sums up the approach here. 9 different sites. And remember, this is one of 6 strategies, right? But when we're thinking about development sites, we've identified these 9 sites that you can see here a host of, the overall goals to be achieved and a host of objectives adjacent to those. And no one site can address all of these objectives. There's different transportation opportunities and challenges, different market opportunities and challenges, economic considerations. All of these things come into play in what's possible. But what we can do is over these 9 sites, check the box, if you will, address all these issues, some areas with more emphasis on student housing, some with more emphasis on workforce housing, others on market rate housing, some with a business and entrepreneurial focus as well, others that contribute revenue that can be leveraged for things like an affordable housing fund that might be able to be utilized citywide. So, this is the crux of the strategy. One of the mistakes communities often make is trying to pack every aspiration into a single site. It's often not possible for a variety of reasons, but when we look at the totality of sites that have the potential for development or redevelopment in this community, if it's gone about in an intentional way, these goals and objectives can be addressed in a holistic way for this community and really help it make strides toward being more inclusive, more resilient, and mitigating some of the worst impacts of growth. So that's our presentation. I think we landed right at 5 o'clock here. Want to share with you all really quick next steps. There's going to be a survey that we need you all to take. This is going to be recorded. This is going to be up for a couple of weeks. And please share it with your friends, share the video, let people know that they can watch the video, take the surveys. We need to hear from you all on these strategies that we've put forth. And then we're going to take that and refine that into some revised scenarios to make that ultimate white paper recommendation. So please give us your input. The website, again, is ClemsonNEXT.com. We need to hear from you and really appreciate you all taking the time to join us today. Bob, do you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, Miriam, when will and you're on mute now, when will the survey be up and the recording? I know the recording will take a little bit to process and get that on, but when will the survey be available?
That'll be up tonight. So if you check tomorrow morning, it'll certainly be there. It may take a minute to process the recording, but within the hour, I think you can expect to find it on the website.
All right. Well, thank you for being here. Again, tonight what you saw was kind of a high-level overview of what these strategies are. There are more details to come. We probably, to go through where we are now, would probably take close to 3 or 4 hours of a presentation. And I don't think that we would keep you here that long, but in the final plan, the recommendations will include a ton more detail. Thanks for your comments in the chat there. I was following along with that, and I can promise you that almost everything we saw in the chat has been taken into consideration and included, will be included in the final details of the plan. Again, please, over the next, we're going to leave the survey open for about the next 10 days. And that's where we want you to go back through, look at the slides again. The recording, you can fast forward on the recording to different areas to digest that information more and provide, there'll be some quantitative data about how supportive you are of strategies, but there's also ample opportunity to provide open-ended comments. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you for your continued participation. And we really need your input at this level as the strategies are refined over the next month as we get to the final product. We will be in touch and keep looking at the website, social media, and be on the lookout for other communications from the city and from the committee about the plan. Thank you all very much, and have a good rest of your evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.